My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I already knew who it was. I opened the message. 4 words. You shouldn't have come here. I looked up from the screen. Toward the beach. And there, just at the edge of the light, someone was standing. Watching me. Then they turned. And disappeared into the dark. I didn't need to see her face. I already knew. She knew I was here. And the game, the one I thought had ended on Sycamore Lane, had just started over. I tried to move on. I really did. After the photograph. After the phone call with the ocean on the other end. After all of it, I went back to work. Drove the truck. Fixed pipes. Waved at neighbors from the driveway of number 8. I told myself it was over. That she was gone. That whatever had happened inside number 14 on Sycamore Lane, it was finished. But something didn't feel right. Not outside. Inside. Because every time I closed my eyes I saw that night again. The kitchen. The silence. Her voice telling me where to wipe. What to move. Where to stand. And the part that stayed with me, the part one couldn't get past, wasn't what she had done. It was what I had done. I had followed her down the street in my socks. I had put on those gloves. I had said yes at that kitchen table and meant it. And then she had walked away. Taken everything. Left me with nothing but the silence and the guilt and the knowledge that I could never speak a word of it to anyone. At 51, that does something to you. It doesn't just hurt. It sits. Quietly. In every room of number 8. In the truck on every drive. In the 3 seconds before sleep every night. Until one day, somewhere in the gray weeks after, I realized I wasn't trying to forget anymore. I was trying to understand. How did she do it? How did I let it happen? That's when I went back to the photograph. I had burned one photograph. But not before I'd looked at it long enough to remember it. I spread what I could recall across the table like evidence. The beach. The sunlight. The buildings behind them. I had looked at this image as a goodbye. A wound. A 5-word message designed to tell me I had lost. But now I looked at it differently. Not like a memory. Like a message with more in it than she intended. The angle of the light. Late afternoon. West-facing beach. Gulf Coast. The buildings in the background. A particular shape of pier just visible at the left edge. A sign on a shop. Blurred but readable if you knew what you were looking for. The more I looked, the more I saw. She had sent me this photograph deliberately. She had chosen it, which meant she had chosen what was in the background. Either she hadn't noticed, or she had, and wanted me to see it. Either way, it was a location. And I had been a plumber for 23 years. I knew how to find things people thought were hidden. I want to be honest about this part. I told myself I was done. Done calling. Done thinking. Done caring. I told myself that for weeks. Then I sat at my kitchen table at number 8 one morning before sunrise, coffee going, street still dark outside, and I finally stopped lying to myself. There was one thing I couldn't live with. Not the guilt. Not the fear of the calls. The not knowing. Not understanding how a man who had been through a divorce, who had spent 8 years being careful, who had told himself he had stopped expecting things, not understanding how that man had walked 3 houses down a quiet Florida street in his socks and become someone he didn't recognize. I needed to understand that. And there was only one way. So I made a decision. Not emotional. Not desperate. Deliberate. I was going to find Rachel Hargrove. Not to confront her. Not to turn her in, because I had already thought that through 100 times and the answer was always the same: prison. Not to get her back. I want to be very clear about that. I was going to find her because I needed to watch her do it again. To see it from the outside. To understand what I had looked like from the outside. I spent 3 days with what I remembered of that photograph. The pier. The shop sign, partial, but enough. The angle of the afternoon light and what that said about which direction the beach faced. The palm species in the background, Florida sable palms, not the rounder canopy type you see further north. I had driven across 3 counties for 23 years. I knew the Gulf Coast the way I knew pipes, not academically, but practically. From the inside, I searched, cross-referenced, eliminated. On the 3rd evening I found it. A town called Union City. Small, quiet, about 60 miles south of Aponte shores along the coast. The pier matched. The shop signage matched. The afternoon light matched. Union City. Rachel had either not noticed the details in the background she'd chosen, or she had gambled that I wasn't the type of man who would look. She had miscalculated. I gave Luis 2 weeks of work and told him I was taking a break. He asked where. I said down the coast. Change of scenery. He nodded. Luis never asked much. I packed what I needed into the truck. Clothes. Tools. A month's cash. On my last morning at number 8 I stood in the kitchen for a few minutes. The table where I had sat with those officers. The window that faced down toward number 14. Dark now, new curtains, new owners. The hall light I had been leaving on. I turned it off, locked the door behind me, backed out of the driveway for the last time. I drove past number 14 on the way out of Sycamore Lane. The for sale sign was gone. Sold. New family's tricycle on the porch. New wind chimes by the screen door. That house had no idea what had happened inside it. I turned onto Birchwood Avenue and headed south. Union City was smaller than Aponte Shores. Tighter. More transient, the kind of town where people come and go and nobody asks too many questions. Beach rentals. Weekend tourists. A long strip of hotels and short-term houses along the waterfront. Which also meant steady plumbing work. I found a room in a weekly rental 3 blocks from the water. Plain, clean, adequate, and I found work within 4 days. Maintenance contracts at 2 beachfront hotels. Repair calls at rental properties. The kind of work where you're in and out of different buildings all day. Where your face becomes familiar without you becoming memorable. Where you learn the rhythms of a place without anyone noticing you're learning them. I kept to myself. I told no one why I was there. I worked. I watched. I waited. Union City had a rhythm. I spent the first 2 weeks learning it. The coffee shop that opened at 6, where the year-rounders went before the tourists came out. The pier where couples walked at sunset. The stretch of beach south of the main strip where the sand was quieter and the foot traffic thinner. The farmers market on Saturday mornings on Pelican Street. I went to all of it. Not looking for her specifically. Looking for the places a woman like Rachel would go. Because I understood something now that I hadn't understood on Sycamore Lane. Rachel was a creature of pattern. She had a method. A specific kind of life she constructed wherever she landed. Warm. Social. Just visible enough to be known without being examined. The kind of woman who becomes a familiar presence in a small town within weeks. Who everyone likes without anyone knowing much about. I was looking for the shape of that presence. The negative space where Rachel would fit. It was a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks in. I was finishing up a call at one of the beachfront hotels, a corroded valve on the 2nd floor that had taken most of the day. I was loading the truck in the parking lot when I saw her. She was walking along the shoreline about 100 yards south. Different clothes. Different hair, lighter now, shorter. But the walk was the same. That particular quality of stillness in motion that she had. Like she was never hurrying, never uncertain, always exactly where she had decided to be. My hands stopped moving. I stood by the truck and watched. She wasn't alone. There was a man beside her. Relaxed, unhurried, leaning toward her slightly when he spoke. The way a man leans toward someone when he is already halfway in love with how she listens. I had leaned that way. I knew exactly what that lean felt like from the inside. I didn't approach her. I thought about it for a long moment standing by that truck. Then I made a different choice. I approached him. I walked down to the beach from the parking lot and came at them from the south, like I was just finishing a walk. Casual. Unhurried. I looked at the man first. Made eye contact. Smiled the way you smile at a stranger on a quiet beach. Hey, I said. Jake. I held out my hand. He hesitated, half a second, then shook it. Ethan, he said. He smiled easily. Open face. The face of a man who still trusted the world. I glanced at Rachel. She was watching me. Not panicked. Not moving. Just watching, with those calm, steady eyes, calculating. I looked back at Ethan. You from around here? He said he'd moved to Union City about 2 months ago. Fresh start, he said. Change of scenery. He smiled when he said it, the smile of a man who believes the story he's telling. I know that smile. I used to wear it. We talked for a few minutes. Ethan talked freely, the way people do when they have nothing to hide and no reason to guard themselves. He was a contractor. Renovation work. Had come down to the coast for a job and decided to stay. He mentioned Rachel the way a man mentions someone he's still surprised to have found. Lucky timing, I guess, he said, and he looked at her when he said it. She smiled. That smile. Warm. Steady. Perfectly calibrated. I watched it land on him. Watched him light up in response. And I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not jealousy. Not anger. Recognition. Because I had been standing exactly where Ethan was standing. On a different street, in a different town, with the same woman performing the same role with the same precision. And I had looked exactly the way he looked. Completely and dangerously certain that what he was feeling was real. After that first meeting I started watching more carefully. From a distance. From the edges. The coffee shop on the main strip. They came in together on Tuesday and Friday mornings. She always ordered for both of them without asking. He always smiled when she did it. The Saturday market on Pelican Street. She knew the vendors by name within weeks. Everyone brightened when she appeared. That quality she had, making every person in a room feel like the most important one, it worked the same way here as it had on Sycamore Lane. She had rebuilt herself completely. New town. New name, presumably. New hair. But the behavior was identical. The lean in when someone spoke. The perfectly timed pause before she answered. The way she made a man feel chosen without ever stating it directly. She hadn't changed. She had restarted. Same software. Fresh installation. And Ethan, easy, open, trusting Ethan, had no idea he was walking into a structure that had already been built once before. That had already cost a man his life. Over the following weeks I learned more about Ethan. Not by asking. By listening. Union City was small enough that people talked. He was 47. Divorced 3 years ago. 2 adult kids up in Georgia he called every Sunday. He'd taken a renovation contract in Union City on impulse, a beach house that needed gutting, and had decided to stay on after it wrapped. He had money, not a lot, but stable. Savings. A pension from a previous career. He was the kind of man who fixed things with his hands and meant what he said and still believed the world was basically decent. He reminded me of myself. Not in looks or history, in the particular quality of his openness. The way a man looks when life has been hard enough to teach him caution but not hard enough to close him off entirely. The specific vulnerability of someone who has been lonely long enough to be ready. That's who Rachel chose. Every time. Not random. Not opportunistic. Targeted. I thought about warning him every day for 2 weeks. I ran through it constantly. Walking up to Ethan on the beach. Sitting down across from him at the coffee shop. I need to tell you something about the woman you're with. Every version of that conversation started the same way. And every version ended the same way too. How do you know her? And then what? I was a man from a town 60 miles away. A plumber who had followed a woman across the Gulf Coast by reading a photograph. A man whose fingerprints were in a dead man's kitchen. A man who had told 2 police officers a story that wasn't true. Every time I imagined warning Ethan I arrived at the same place. There was no version of that conversation that didn't eventually lead back to Mark Hargrove. To Aponte Shores PD. To Officer Trevino's notebook clicking shut. She had made sure of that. Not by accident. By design. I couldn't warn Ethan without destroying myself. She had known that when she chose me. She had probably known it when she chose him. 3.5 weeks after I arrived in Union City, she acknowledged me. Not directly. Rachel was never direct about anything. It was at the Saturday market on Pelican Street. I was at the far end, near the fish stall, when she came in with Ethan. She moved through the market the way she always moved, easy, social, stopping to talk to vendors she'd already made into friends. Then she came to the far end. She stopped at a flower stall 2 tables away from me. She picked up a bundle of white flowers and held them up, considering them. And without turning her head, without looking directly at me, she said quietly, "They're prettier than they look at first." To the vendor. Ostensibly. But her voice was pitched exactly so that I would hear it. She set the flowers down. Turned. And walked back to Ethan. Never looked at me. But I understood. "I know you're here. I see you. And I'm not afraid of you." She had known I was in Union City. Maybe from the beginning. Maybe the whole time I had been watching her, she had been watching me watch her. I started paying attention to the details around Ethan's life. The beach house renovation he'd come to Union City for, I found out he'd been offered a second contract after the first wrapped. A larger property. Better money. I found out who had recommended him for the second contract. A woman. New to town. Well liked. Knew everyone on the waterfront within weeks. The renovation had extended his stay by 4 months. She had extended his stay. She had made herself indispensable to his reasons for being here, Not by asking him to stay, but by giving him reasons that had nothing to do with her. So that when he thought about why he was in Union City, he thought, the work, the town, the life I'm building here. Not her. She was the invisible architecture of his decision to stay. And the beach house he was renovating, I looked it up. It was owned by an LLC registered 3 months ago. The registered agent's name was a law firm in Sarasota. But the LLC had been formed the month before the photograph arrived in my mailbox on Sycamore Lane. She hadn't fled to Union City. She had built Union City. While she was still standing in the driveway of number 14, she was already building this. It was a Thursday night. I was sitting on the small porch of my rental, 3 blocks from the water. The Gulf was louder at night in Union City, less traffic, less noise to compete with. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I already knew. I opened the message. 4 words on the screen. You shouldn't have come here. I looked up from my phone. Toward the beach. And there, just at the edge of the light from the boardwalk, someone was standing at the waterline. Watching my direction. I stood up. Walked toward the beach. They turned and walked south along the shoreline. Unhurried. Like they had all the time in the world. Like they wanted me to watch them go. I stood at the edge of the boardwalk and watched until the figure disappeared into the dark. I didn't follow. Because I understood what the message meant. It wasn't leave. It wasn't a threat. It was something colder than that. I know you're here. I know why you came. And I want you to know that I'm not concerned. She was not afraid of me. She had never been afraid of me. And now I was standing on a beach in a town I had driven 60 miles to reach, having uprooted my life, left Sycamore Lane, followed a photograph like a map, and she was still the one holding all the cards. That night I sat in my rental room and asked myself the question I had been circling for weeks. Why did she send the photograph? Not the 5-word message on the back. The photograph itself. She was careful. She was precise. She did not make accidental mistakes. Which meant the landmarks in the background, the pier, the shop sign, the angle of light that said Gulf Coast late afternoon, had not been accidental. She had sent me a locatable photograph. She had known I might look. Which meant, on some level, she had wanted me to find her. Or she had wanted to know if I would. A test. If I stayed on Sycamore Lane, if I buried it, lived with the guilt, kept quiet, she would know I was safe. Contained. No threat. But if I came, if I followed the photograph 60 miles down the coast and showed up in Union City, then she would know something else about me. That I was not contained. That I was a loose thread. That I needed to be managed. And now that I was here, now that I had passed her test in the wrong direction, I understood something with complete clarity. I was not the one watching Rachel. I had never been. The next morning I saw Ethan at the coffee shop on the main strip. He was alone, reading something on his phone, coffee in hand. He saw me come in. Jake. He lifted a hand. Genuine. Warm. Didn't know you were still in town. I said I'd picked up some work at the beachfront hotels. He nodded. Said that made sense. Good steady work down here. He asked if I'd tried the fish place on the pier yet. He was easy and open and completely, dangerously unaware. And I sat across from him and had a normal conversation about nothing. The work, the town, the weather off the Gulf, while everything I knew sat behind my teeth like a stone. I wanted to say, she is doing to you exactly what she did to me. I wanted to say, the woman you are falling in love with is a plan, not a person. I wanted to say, there is a man in a Pondy Shores named Mark Hargrove who is dead, and she will not stop. I said none of it. I finished my coffee. Said I'd see him around. Walked back out into the Union City morning. And stood on the sidewalk for a long time in the Gulf Coast heat. I am still in Union City. I want to be clear about that. I have not gone back to Sycamore Lane. I have not gone to the police, for all the reasons I have already explained, and for new ones I am still working out. But something has shifted. I came here thinking I would watch from a distance. Understand. Find the shape of what she was from the outside so I could finally understand what I had looked like from the inside. I found that. But I found something else too. A man named Ethan who fixes things with his hands and calls his kids on Sundays and doesn't know what is being built around him. And a woman who is building it with the same precision she used on Sycamore Lane. Who has already extended Ethan's stay by 4 months. Who already knows the vendors at the Saturday market. Who has an LLC registered in Sarasota and a beach house under renovation and a plan that is further along than I realized when I arrived. I don't know yet what I'm going to do. But I know this. She sent me a message on that beach to tell me I shouldn't have come. And for the first time since a Tuesday afternoon in late August when I looked up from a toolbox and felt eyes on me. I am not afraid of her message. I left Pondy Shores because I needed to understand. I found Rachel. I found Ethan. I found a plan already in motion in a town that doesn't know it yet. And I found something I hadn't expected to find. Myself. Not the man who followed her down Sycamore Lane in his socks. Not the man who sat at that kitchen table and said yes to a word that locked the door behind him. A different man. One who looked at a photograph like evidence. Who drove 60 miles and showed up and kept his eyes open. Who sat across from Ethan in a coffee shop and felt the full weight of what it means to know something you can't yet say. I am still a plumber from Pondy Shores. I still fix what's broken. But I'm starting to think the thing that needs fixing now isn't a pipe. Somewhere behind me on Pelican Street, on the pier at sunset, on the Saturday market where everyone knows her name, Rachel is building her next life. With Ethan at the center of it. And somewhere in Union City, in a rental room 3 blocks from the water. I am deciding what to do about that. She said I shouldn't have come. But Ethan doesn't know what's coming. Episode 3, coming soon.